to Irata Systems video, SNES Repair Secrets. Throughout this video we will instruct you on how to repair the Super Nintendo system, which we will refer to as the SNES system, and its components. Now there's two things that I would like to mention before we get started. Number one is, you'll notice right off the bat it's not a very fancy video. We're doing it here at our workbench. Not a lot of fancy graphics or music or whatever, so the intent of the video is not to wow you with fancy subtitles and etc. The intent of the video is to train you on how to repair and turn around for your customers the Super Nintendo system, and we will do that throughout the course of this video. Number two, we're a very small firm. We don't make a lot of money off these videos, so I would ask you to respect our copyright law, our copyright on this video, and not make copies for your friends. If they need a copy or would like a copy, please refer them to Irata Systems, 2562 East Glade, Mesa, Arizona, 85204. In this segment we're going to cover repair and maintenance of the Super Nintendo control deck SNES 001. The first thing that you want to observe is when you get the control decks in, you want to look for any kind of abnormality there might be. Check, first of all, the dust cover, push it down, check the connector to see if there's any obstructions. I've seen some that have had a lot of dog hair in them. I've seen some that have a Q-tip or candy wrapper stuck down in there, so you want to check for any obstructions. Use a small pick tool to remove that if it's there, but be careful not to bend any of the connectors. And then try it, test it out on your bench to see if it works or not. The first level of troubleshooting, what you need to do is you need to get an AC adapter that you know that is good, and you want to plug it in. And the first thing you want to do is turn on the unit and make sure you get a red light. At this point, if you get a red light, you know that the AC adapter is good, and you know that the internal rectifying and filtering circuit is good. You should get a red light at this point. If you don't get a red light, then it can be the AC adapter, or it could be something internal. If you don't get a red light, then the first thing you need to do is test the output of the AC adapter. If that is 0 volts, then what you need to do is troubleshoot the AC adapter. Okay, and that's a different part of the video. You can fast forward to that part if you want to find out how to troubleshoot the AC adapter. The next thing that you want to do is you'll notice that without the AC adapter plugged in, what you want to do is you want to turn on the unit for just a split second. Turn it on, and you'll notice that the red light will blip for just a split second. That's because there's some internal filter capacitors that need to be drained before you get inside this. If you do not, and I can't emphasize this enough, if you do not drain the internal filter, AC filter capacitors, and you get in there and start messing around, there's enough voltage in there that the CMOS chips and the main CPU and memory chips can be ruined, or you can actually damage something in there. So what you want to do is, as soon as everything's unplugged, make sure you go ahead. Now watch. You can see that light blipped for just a split second. That drained the AC, or the filter capacitors in there. So be sure you do that each time before you even open the unit. Turn it on, make sure that light blips off, and then you can go ahead and proceed. Okay, I wanted to take it apart and get into the unit and show you how to do some repair once we get into the unit. As I mentioned before, you have to have a special tool for getting into the Super Nintendo. So here we go. Some people choose, when they remove these 6 screws, they choose to put back in normal screws with Phillips head on them. That's up to you. If you want to do that, then the customer will have access to the inside. Okay, once the 6 screws are loose, you can flip it over and the top just lifts off. Now what I've done is I've got a couple of butter dishes, and I've labeled one short and one long. And what I do with these is as I take the screws out of the Super Nintendo, I put them in here so that later when I go to put them back, I know which ones go where. So I'll set those up here. Now the 6 that I just took out, as I mentioned, they're special screws with tamper-proof heads on them, and those are the only 6 in the whole unit that are tamper-proof. So I usually put those in the small, but it's up to you wherever you want to put them. So I put them in the long, and then there's more small than there is long, and therefore it's a little easier to sort them out when you get ready to put it back together. On the lid, a couple things you might want to look for. There is an interlock mechanism that Nintendo built into the lid so that when a cartridge is inserted and you turn on the power, the interlock lever mates with this groove right here in the cartridge. So you insert the cartridge, turn on power, and now the cartridge physically cannot be removed. The reason for that is if the cartridge is inserted or removed with power on, you can damage the cartridge. And several were damaged, I'm sure several million were damaged with the NES. And Nintendo designed this in so you would avoid that with the Super Nintendo. But just like anything else, the more parts you add, the more probability you have of failure in those parts. So you want to make sure that the lever action is intact and working. Sometimes there's dirt and gunk and even pop been spilled down in here, so you may have to take this apart to clean that out. And on this side, there's a reset button with a spring here. Some of that I have these springs missing right here, and others have had the little push button broke or dirty. So you need to check those out and make sure they're fine. The dust cover door should be intact. It will not open with the power on. It just bumps into that lever. Okay? And if the door's broke or any one of these are broke, you can get the parts for the lid from us if you need to. So I'm going to set that aside with the cartridge. Now we take our first look at the inside of a Super Nintendo. You'll notice a couple things. One, there is an eject mechanism here. Nintendo designed this so that small children using the Super Nintendo would be able to remove the cartridge without having to pull up on it. You can push the eject lever and it will simply eject the cartridge very smoothly. Again, the off switch has to be off, on-off switch has to be off in order for that to work. To remove the eject mechanism, there's a little lever over here that you just lift up, and then you gently lift up on it, and then as you can slide it out, and that allows the eject lever to be removed. And then over here on the left side there's a spring. Now the spring, there's a top and a bottom. One is longer than the other. The longer arm goes on the bottom. Just remember that. It goes on the bottom and towards the outside. The shorter arm goes on the top and towards the inside. And I'll show you how that works when we go to reassemble this. So I'll set those to the side. The next part that you want to remove is the on-off switch. And these go bad, so you may, in the future, you may have to replace a couple of these. The way that you remove that is there's two screws here, and then a 2-pin header and a jumper right here that you pull off. 2-pin header and a connector that you can just pull off. So remove the 2-pin jumper, and then remove these 2 screws right here. Those are small screws, and they go in the small tub. Okay? And then this just lifts off. You can lay that down in here. Okay? The next item you want to remove is the front controller jack and LED assembly. It's got the LED for power on, and it also has the 2 jacks for the left player 1 and the right player 2 hand controllers to go into. So that is removed by simply lifting up on the assembly, and then gently, as you hold the ribbon cable, gently rock it back and forth as you pull out on it, and it will slide right out. Okay? And that is one whole piece. So if any of these break, or if the ribbon cable is damaged, or the LED doesn't come on, and if the LED is burned out, you'll want to you can replace the LED. It's a special LED, but you'll want to replace this assembly. Okay, now we're down into the guts of the Super Nintendo. You can see over here this button right here is the reset button, and I've had a few of those go bad. So when the reset button is bad, you'll want to take this apart further, and you'll have to unsolder and replace that reset button. The next thing you want to do, there's 4 screws here and 2 large screws here that you want to remove. So we'll go ahead and take those out. First of all, I'll take out the 4 small screws. Okay. And that leaves us with the 2 large screws that also hold the connector down. Alright, with those 6 screws, the 4 small ones and the 2 large ones, you're able to remove the top RF shield will now come off. And this obviously is to shield the RF frequency interference that might come off the motherboard. Now you'll notice, now that we've exposed the insides, there's a couple things. You'll notice that they're all surface mount, and very few shops, even the authorized repair centers that I've visited, and I visited a couple of them, most of them are not geared up for removal and replacement of surface mount technology parts. If there's those of you that are brave enough that want to proceed with that, you can get chips, certain of these chips, but others are proprietary chips you must get from Nintendo. This chip right here is the CPU. This chip right here is the RAM chip that services the CPU. It's the right memo pad, if you will, of the CPU. These 2 chips, this is PPU1, this is PPU2, and these are the SRAM chips that service each one respectively. This chip up here is a, this one right down here is the CIC chip, which in conjunction with the reset circuit checks for the integrity of the cartridge to make sure that it's a real Nintendo authorized game. If it doesn't have a similar CIC chip up on the game cartridge, it issues a reset to the CPU and the PPUs every 10 seconds or so. So this chip goes bad, and if it does, you'll get a flashing screen, just as if you, or no screen at all, a blank screen, because it's not functioning properly. One thing that goes bad quite often is the 62-pin connector that's located right here. That connector is removed by simply gripping it on either side and gently rocking it back and forth, and it will then lift off. You need to be careful because down inside the underbelly of the connector is a plastic spacer, and on some of them they're loose and will come right out. Others they're pretty snug. This one, the connector can be replaced, and often you get them in where this is bad because someone's got in there and tried to clean it with a Q-tip or use some foreign object to try to clean that with a pair of tweezers or something. It also can be filled with dog hair or human hair or just dust and dirt and lint if people are not real careful about what they do to clean this. Of the inners, and for those of you that are familiar with this, this might be redundant, but you have the CPU, which is the main brains of the system, and this is the big brother of the 6502, and the PPU and the CPU are the picture processing units which control the picture to the screen, and they're very sophisticated, and they are unique custom chips designed for Nintendo specifically for this application. The Moss-tail chips are just standard, these chips are standard SRAM chips, and you have a standard 74HC04 chip here, along with the custom CIC chip here. Okay, here is the reset button, which we've had to replace before, and once I get this apart, I'll flip it over and show you the bottom of that and how to replace that. Located over here is the 5-volt regulator, which is used to regulate incoming DC voltage to 5 volts for the motherboard. And you'll note right down here next to the 7805 is a 1.5 amp fuse, and that if something goes wrong on the inside, or if water's spilt on the inside or something to that effect, this will blow, and once the water evaporates, if there's no damage done to the motherboard, this fuse can be replaced and everything will function properly in there. So let's proceed. The next item you need to remove is the sound module, and there's 2 screws, one down in this corner and one down in this corner, that once the screws are removed, it will be released. And one thing I failed to mention earlier is you need to be careful about static electricity. You'll note that I'm working on a wooden bench, and in the shop area where I'm at, we don't have any carpet on the floor. There is a towel here, but the static is kept very minimal. You may want to wear a static bracelet if you're depending on the conditions of your area. If it's susceptible to static, you may want to wear a static discharge bracelet and ground yourself, because these are very sensitive to static. Whenever the board is removed or inserted, I recommend that you use a static protective bag to keep it, and when you transport it back to us or we transport one to you, I recommend that you keep it in one of those bags in order to protect it from static and further damage. So now that those screws are loose, you gently rock the sound module back and forth, and it'll come right out. The 2 screws, again, are the small variety, and I just placed them here. This is the sound module, and it's a contained unit. We just swap these out. If there's something wrong with the sound and you suspect that it's the sound module, go ahead and ship these back, and again, call or write for current pricing. The module out, it exposes one of the final 3 screws that we need to remove in order to get into the motherboard. There's another, right up here in this corner is another short kind of copper gold screw. And then on either side of the RF modulator is a silver screw which needs to be removed. Okay. Now that those are removed,